There is no way to describe what's going on in the world right now. I keep, going back to the cliche, it's always darkest before the dawn, and then the humorous cliche, it's always darkest right before it goes pitch black. And I don't know where we are, but I know what it feels like. A world of hell and a world of absolute evil and rubbish. And I sit here, lamenting it, the degree to which innocent civilians are the victims of their governments. Everywhere. From Canada to America to Israel to Palestine to the world. The innocent civilians are the victims of their governments. And we're witnessing it now in real time. Ineptitude of governments, corruption of governments, or whatever you want, spiraling out of control in an endless cycle of violence, destruction, breeding another generation of resentment, breeding another generation of violence, destruction, which breeds another generation of violence and destruction. We all know what's going on in the Middle East. I was on with Jack Posobiec earlier this week, Human Events, talking about it. It's sickening beyond words. Full stop. You try not to think about it, it's impossible. You try not to envision what it's like to be living under these circumstances, it's impossible. One of my, back on 9/11, and the day it happened, and I remember, everyone remembers where they were, but during the day, I remember where I was that night with my girlfriend at the time to become wife, and my best friend at a place called Hurley's Irish Pub on Crescent in Montreal. Like the most beautiful classic Irish pub you can imagine. And we were sitting there and we're listening to Irish folk music. And you could just, at least I remember having a beer and just closing my eyes and feeling what it must have felt like. The terror, the horror, and that moment, that ultimate moment. And it's impossible not to feel it. It's impossible not to close your eyes and actually in your spirit feel it to the extent that any human can feel it, feel it. And this is what's going on day in and day out now. And then you see the way the world reacts to these things. And it's the people with the least to lose, the people with the most protections, the people with the most securest government positions, the people who themselves will hardly, if ever, even potentially be on the front lines, talking tough with other people's children, talking tough with other people's citizens. It's easy to talk tough. And that's where we're at. Dark times, to say the least. And I don't want to spend every minute of the shows, talking about what can't be avoided. And then the flip side is, it almost feels, I don't know if trite is the word, disrespectful almost to try to talk about lighter subject matter. It almost feels maybe like it's disrespectful to try to even talk about anything else that's clearly not of the same political human cost importance. But then, it's not going to be whatever. Those are the dilemmas, people. But we are going to talk a bit about it because like all, what is it? The classic principle of politics, never let a crisis go to waste. And they are not letting this crisis go to waste. Nobody's letting this human tragedy go to waste. And we're going to talk about it because some don't let it go to waste in the legitimate sense of, I like to think that people will accuse me of that which I'm faulting others for. I want to know how the hell this can happen. And I'm old enough now to have lived through multiple cycles of this where clearly the status quo responses don't work. And every time they say this time it'll be different. And then every time what ends up happening, breeding another generation of. I don't know what the solution is to such a complex human crisis problem. But I'm old enough to have lived through it at least twice before. And it's the same cycle every time. It's the same talk every time. And the government does what it does. Innocent civilians die. And eventually, once the trauma of the event lingers for those who are not directly affected, life goes back to normal to some extent. But my goodness, are they politicking it and politicking hard? And we'll get into that. Hypocrites, shameless hypocrites, and liars, period. All right. But just to tell you what we've got going on in the show today. So we're going to end on YouTube as we do to go over to Rumble. We're live. I should have checked. We are live on Rumble. Good. We are live on Locals. And we're live. Now, there's a question here from Lord Gestacost at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. And I'll get to it afterwards, actually. I'll get to it in the Locals if there's a way to... How do I not delete? I want to flag that. I'll screen grab it and get to it later. So for those who don't know, we start on YouTube and Rumble, end on YouTube, go over exclusively to Rumble, and then at the end when we're done with the show, we go on over to vivabarneslaw.locals.com for an after discussion with our Locals community, which, as everybody knows, is wildly above average. Today's show, I'm going to go through some of the hypocrisy. Brett Weinstein has had some of the very, very interesting perspectives of this entire last week. Thoughts that I'm not saying that I'm a coward. Thoughts that I've had that I have maybe I have shared them and I just don't think I have, but that I'm reluctant to share because when you ask certain questions, people start making certain assumptions as to intentions. We're going to get into that. Trump again being lied about by the most foul, lying, dishonest people on the internet who are consistent in their foulness and dishonesty. Defiant L's. We're going to take a couple of defiant L's. We're going to talk about the Trump DC case where Jack Smith is now asking that Trump be obliged to disclose his affirmative defenses in advance, because you don't want to catch the government off guard when they're persecuting, weaponizing the political system. Going to talk about that. And we'll see what we get through at noon. 5 times August, who many of you know, and if you don't know him, gosh darn it, you need to know who he is going to come on, talk about what's been going on. We're going to catch up, and he's going to play his latest song. And I've asked him if he can play the song that always makes me cry, God Help Us. And then Eva Chipiuk is going to come on. Eva Chipiuk is the attorney for the Freedom Convoy during the Canadian Commission on Justin Trudeau's invocation of the act, works with Keith Wilson. She's going to come on and give us the update about what's going on with Tamara Lich's and Chris Barber's criminal trial, and Brian Peckford and Maxime Bernier's travel ban file, which hits the federal court today. And I thought I had the link, but it seems that my link expired yesterday. So I was going to live stream it, but I'm not even sure that you're allowed live streaming it, and I don't want to get into trouble. And then I was going to do like the live stream listen to, but instead Eva will come on and talk to us about what's going on. But where do we start here? Oh... is everybody okay? Let me see if everyone's okay in the chat. His new song is good, got to admit. Oh yeah, I can highlight this. It says, it's amazing. The problem is once you have a favorite, like God Help Us, and the other one there. They're all amazing. They're all amazing. You pick your favorite. Seriously, Rumble needs to get it together. Growing pains, they're going to get there. And constructive criticism. Okay, now let's see here. Okay, we're good. Let's do it. Okay, so where do we start? I'm not starting with the lie debunked. I'm going to start with the lie lied. The lie mischaracterized. They are the worst people on... It's tough. Like I call them a piece of shit. Because I can't think... Oh, and we also have as an update, Josh Kruger, the activist who was killed in Philadelphia. Very interesting apparent twist in the case. We're going to get to that as well. Starting the show, Tristan Snell. There is no word other than a piece of shit tizzle. There is no other way to describe this man who consistently is among the worst people on the internet. At one point, I called him a piece of sh because he put out a tweet on September 11th, which read, I forget which way it went. September 11th. 9/11 was a terrorist attack. January 6th was a terrorist attack. And I said that there is no other way to describe someone who says something like that other than calling them a dishonest piece of shit tizzle. Period. Well, he's done it again, by the way. He's done it again. Because yesterday, it's an amazing thing. You read something and you say, okay, it's false. I don't yet know that it is, but just reading it, it has to be false. Or it has to be a deliberate, disingenuous twisting of whatever in some wildly deranged mind could be considered the truth. Tristan Snell, who many of you might recall from such prosecutions as Trump University. Imagine, look, this guy's claim to fame. Lawyer, fighter for democracy, advocate for innovators and creators, prosecuted Trump University. I mean, it's one thing to have done that, and then it's another thing to have it be your claim to fame in your bio. If I am recognized for one thing on this earth, Tristan Snell says to himself while drafting his Twitter bio, I want to be known for having prosecuted Trump University. Oh, he's also a commentator at MSNBC, and I now know what NAFO means. It means North American Fella Organization, which has something to do with supporting Ukraine. They call themselves fellas. Kinzinger had it in his profile for the longest time. I had no idea what it meant, and now I understand what fella means when they do hashtag fella, and NAFO is North American Fellow Organization, as far as I understand. So Tristan Snell puts out a tweet, and it says, Trump just praised Hezbollah as, quote, very smart, end quote, for attacking Israel. Now, I'm no idiot. I'm no conspiracy theorist. And it's not because Trump has Jewish members of his family, son-in-law, grandchildren, that I would say that this is a lie. It's not just because of that. I would say that this is a lie because nobody in their right mind would praise a terrorist organization, Hezbollah, as being smart for attacking Israel. Nobody would say that in their right mind, which leads me to believe that if this is accurate, Trump is not in his right mind, which many people already believe, and therefore they're going to believe this lie as truth because it already confirms what they already believe, so they don't even bother to say, this sounds like a lie. And they believe it. Well, Trump is deranged. This is a deranged thing to say, therefore Trump said it. Therefore, I believe Tristan Snell when Tristan Snell says Trump said Hezbollah was very smart for attacking Israel. So I say, okay, smells like bullshit. It might. If it smells like poo-poo, and it looks like poo-poo, and it feels like poo-poo, chances are it's a load of political poo-poo. So I found the original clip, and we'll listen to it. And you will tell me, I'll run a poll to see who thinks that it sounds like Trump praised Hezbollah as being very smart for attacking. Let's just, be reasonable, open-minded. Maybe he said it.
The $6 billion was a tremendous amount of money, but nothing compared to the hundreds of billions of dollars that Biden allowed them to make in oil and other things. Hundreds of billions. They became a rich nation in 3 years. That's why they're doing this. They have so much money, they don't know what to do with it. They had no money. They were broke. And then there was the inevitable attack 4 days later, which I predicted. And then 2 nights ago, I read all of Biden's security people. Can you imagine? National defense people. And they said, gee, I hope Hezbollah doesn't attack from the north because that's the most vulnerable spot. I said, wait a minute. Hezbollah is very smart. They're all very smart. The press doesn't like when they say it. I said that President Xi of China, 1.4 billion people, he controls it with an iron fist. I said, he's a very smart man. They killed me the next day. I said he was smart. What am I going to say? But Hezbollah, they're very smart. And they have a national defense minister or somebody saying, I hope Hezbollah doesn't attack us from the north. So the following morning they attacked. They might not have been doing it, but if you listen to this jerk, you would attack from the north because he said that's our weak spot. Whoever heard of officials saying on television that they hope the enemy doesn't attack in a certain area? Now, unless it's a con job. But you know what a con job is? You're waiting there ready. You want them if you want them, but they weren't ready. They weren't ready. Say what you want. Israel was not ready. This was a big surprise. This was a terrible thing that happened. They weren't ready. But if you wanted them to attack because you've got 1 million people there with guns and you're going to blast the hell, then you do exactly. But they didn't have that. They didn't have that. Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, bragged just days before the attack.
We're no longer in the relevant part.
Middle East seems to be quite quiet.
We've all heard that now. Let's just go in the chat. Actually, let us go back to what Tristan Snell said Trump said. Trump just praised Hezbollah as, quote, very smart, end quote, for attacking Israel. Now, this is not to play. I'm going to leave that in the back and come back to it. This is not to play semantics like, wordsmith of the devil lawyer. There is a difference between saying someone is smart and versus smart for. And the idea that one would criticize anybody for, in their view, accurately assessing strategic intelligence, even if it's used for evil, fault them for that, makes that person an idiot. I was going to tweet it out because it's a decent insight, although I doubt I'm the first person to have it. Nobody has ever defeated an adversary by underestimating their intelligence. No, you don't beat someone at chess by assuming they're dumb and that whatever they're doing because they're dumb. You don't win wars. You don't defeat adversaries or enemies by underestimating their intelligence. And the idea to think that maybe if people didn't think that these organizations were dumb, maybe if people operate on the basis that they were in fact intelligent, strategic, that something like what occurred on Saturday might not have happened. Perhaps one might contemplate the idea that when you underestimate your enemies, when you underestimate their intelligence, their strategery, or dare say their evil inhumanity, when you underestimate it, that's when you get caught off guard. Trump, you'd have to be an idiot to think and interpret what Trump just said as praising Hezbollah for having attacked Israel. What he's saying, apparently they were wrong on the attack in the north, and it either never happened or didn't happen on the scale that anyone was reporting, but that's what they were reporting at the time. The idea that he's praising Hezbollah as intelligent for having attacked Israel, you are an idiot, a liar, or a combination of both for publicly saying that, for publicly letting other people believe that if they rely on your assessment of facts. What he's saying, and it's quite clear to anybody with half a brain, is that just because someone is evil, just because someone's a communist dictator, doesn't mean they're dumb. And in fact, if they are smart, it might make them all the more effective at doing what they're doing. Intelligence without a moral compass is not an asset, it is a liability. But to underestimate, just to assume someone's dumb because they're an enemy, that I would dare say might make you ill-prepared and ignorant. So Tristan Snell comes out with that. Actually, I want to add it back for a particular reason. I want to add this back because, hold on.
The $6 billion was a tremendous amount of money, but nothing compared to the hundreds of billions of dollars that Biden allowed them to make in oil and other things. Hundreds of billions. They became a rich nation in 3 years. That's why they're doing this. They have so much money. They don't.
Pausing it there. There was a talking point, or at least a political talking point circulating. Biden had just recently unfrozen $6 billion in assets to Iran. Iran funds Hamas. And therefore, that $6 billion was responsible for the attack that occurred on Saturday. People are not wrong to point out that temporally there probably was not enough time to, even if the retort to that was they didn't unfreeze, they didn't give them cash, they unfroze assets which were only to be used for humanitarian purposes, yada, yada, yada. As if by liberating a terrorist regime to not have to take care of its citizens by providing the humanitarian aid doesn't facilitate the terroristic objectives of that government. As if that's not the case. All right. Oh, I'm sorry, government. You have to pay for roads and food and take care of your citizens, but you're not doing that because you're pursuing terroristic objectives. So the international community will do that for you, but we're not going to say you're not using the money for terrorism, because we're telling you to use it for humanitarian aid, which thus liberates other finances and other attention efforts for terrorists. You have to think like a child to think along such simplistic levels. Like a parent says to the kid, don't spend your allowance on drugs or alcohol. And then they spend it on drugs and alcohol, where they say, well, that wasn't your money that I spent on drugs and alcohol. That was my money. I worked. I mowed some lawns. I got $20. So I didn't spend your $20 on drugs and alcohol. I spent my 20. Well, you know what a parent would say? You're not getting my $20 anymore. That's how it works. But some of these political pundits apparently think like children. Like the kid saying, that $20 that you just unfroze for humanitarian assets, well, I'm spending on that. Now I get to spend the $20 I already had in my pocket on something else. So that being said, even as relates to the $6 billion that was recently unfrozen, that doesn't respond to the $1.7 billion that was transferred in the dead of night on pallets full of liquid cash by Obama in 2016 to Iran. But, set that aside. That was their money.
I don't know what to do with it. They had no money. They were broke. And then there was the inevitable attack 4 days later, which I predicted. And
I don't know how he
2
predicted
nights
it.
ago, I read all of Biden's security people. Can you imagine? National defense people. And they said, gee, I hope Hezbollah doesn't attack from the north, because that's the most vulnerable spot. I said, wait a minute.
I'll stop it there. We are seeing a lot of this. People going public and broadcasting to the world weaknesses, deficiencies, and areas of lacking security. We've seen it. It's an outrageous. It's not like I was talking to someone. It's not like any adversary is waiting on a tweet from CNN or a 60 Minutes report to assess the security weaknesses of their adversary. But there is something odd about coming out and publicly saying something like, I hope they don't attack from the north, or just to pull up that 60 Minutes report from 3 weeks ago, shortly before this horrific attack. 60 Minutes.
The fight over the court has brought the country to a cold civil war.
This is talking about the internal, call it corruption scandal that the Netanyahu government has been facing for the last little while. They want to overhaul the court to, from what I understand, remove some of the power of the court so that the government can function without the supervision or oversight of the court, with their alliance with some unsavory characters in government. And this is 60 Minutes 3 weeks before the attack, saying, well, geez, this is causing some upheaval in Israel, within the government. Something of a cold civil war, they say. Listen to this.
In July, the first step of Levine's judicial overhaul passed, severely limiting the court's power to strike down government decisions. Some 10,000 military reservists were so upset, they pledged to stop showing up for duty. When they made their decision,
okay, so I want to get
readiness.
Here,
so many Frei has
25 years. It's in my blood.
10,000 rivers. I don't.
Hand.
The military has warned that losing so many pilots and high-ranking reservists could jeopardize readiness and hurt national security. But several former heads of the military and Mossad support the protest and blame the government for allowing the situation to come to this. If you did find out that Israel was at risk because of so many reservists leaving, would you step back and withdraw your proposals?
What's the price of democracy? What are you suggesting me to do? We'll tell the Israeli citizens, okay, don't go to vote. There's no need to hold.
I played it the other day. This is 60 Minutes 3 weeks before. Now, I don't know if the reservists were in fact not available, if they had in fact not showed up to work. You have advanced warning and advanced announcement to the world coming on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War of 1973. What kind of governments announce to the world weaknesses resulting from political insecurity within a nation? What kind of governments announce to the world border insecurity or border issues in real time? It's crazy. It's so crazy that it makes so little sense that you begin asking yourself questions, and if you ask them publicly, people look at you with the stink eye of a tinfoil hat theory. And Brett Weinstein, absolutely everybody knows who Brett Weinstein is if you're watching, he said a couple of things that are very, very interesting, although thorny statements to make publicly. Brett Weinstein is a smart man in general, so I do tend to approach everything he says as though it's smart. Tristan Snell is a lying SOB, so I tend to approach everything he says as something coming from a lying SOB. And lo and behold, Tristan Snell's Trump praises Hezbollah for attack is garbage. And I'm approaching Brett Weinstein as having said something insightful and smart, and I think he has. This is Brett Weinstein's tweet. The divisions instantly created by the barbaric Hamas attack were a huge win for the deep state. That may just be the luck of the draw, but other possibilities exist as well. We must be able to discuss the full landscape without becoming villains in each other's eyes. And I said it from day one, it just doesn't make sense. And before you talk about reactions that might exacerbate the problem, you need to answer the most fundamental question as to how this could have possibly ever occurred in the first place. And maybe there's a perfectly non-negligent, non-conspiratorial answer. But we did the best we could, and this is the result of the best we could, will be a very, very unsatisfactory answer. And that is the most forgiving. What's the word I'm looking for? That is the most charitable, conceivable explanation. We did our best, and this is the result of our best. Well, I'm sorry, that won't cut it, and you all have to resign and get a government in there that can do better. That's at most charitable. At less charitable, We were aware of certain weaknesses, but we were too busy fighting our internal corruption to do what we are there to do. First and foremost, protect the citizens. And then you can only go downhill from other interpretations that you can impute there. Weinstein's asking the questions, and what is fascinating, he put out a tweet a few days ago, the fractions or the conflict that has now been instantaneously overnight fomented among what were hitherto political, ideological allies. Allies, I hate that word because it almost sounds like party over correctness. People who were politically and ideologically aligned. The populist movement on the right has now been fractioned and shattered into 1,000 pieces where, if there were a DeSantis versus Trump primary battle, friction, well, holy crab apples, has that now taken on new levels. If there were, the Christian right and the Jewish right had finally united. And now, in light of the response coming from Israel, they're fractioned. The left, and I've got a couple of these tweets because they're just outrageous. They just show you when you don't understand who you're dealing with, you are always surprised when they bite your hand afterwards. The left, the Jewish Democrats on the left who aligned with the BLM for the Summer of Love, taking a knee, Black Lives Matter, now seeing BLM put out tweets of a paraglider, which is one of what the terrorists did to get into that festival, machine gun wielding paragliders landing at a festival and slaughtering 260 people. BLM, Chicago, BLM, I forget wherever it is, puts out a tweet with the paraglider in a silhouette, or just the profile, and I stand with Palestine. And incidentally, I will not fault anyone ever for standing with Palestine, but when the response to wanton slaughter is I stand with Palestine, that's not as simple of a statement as saying I stand with Palestine anymore. When the CUPE, this union out of Ontario, comes out and says Palestine uprising, something along those lines, like supporting the Palestine uprising, you're not just saying I support a Palestinian state and I support the Palestinian people. You're saying something much different when that is your response to a slaughter. And now some people are finally realizing that. So, but the outrageous thing is, you're seeing how in real time. They're seeing it in real time. Is this it? This is from Charlie Kirk. Now, I probably should. I remember seeing these tweets in real time. And Charlie Kirk, if he does me wrong by making me retweet a tweet that never existed, I will correct and I will verify. But thus far, Charlie Kirk has been reliable. April, let's see, what is that, April? I can't tell if that's April or April or May 4th or April 5th or May 4th, whatever. 2021. I will never stop saying Black Lives Matter and may even get a shirt myself. 2 days ago, F them. Maybe the right was right about BLM. After they put out that tweet, which we're going to see in a second. No, we're not going to see the tweet in a second because I don't have it. It's just amazing. It's as though people are now discovering that if you thought that you were on the side of a party that tolerates and condones violence, and then you're shocked when they tolerate and condone violence, it says one of three things. Either you thought the violence they tolerated and condoned, punch a Nazi, destroy fascists, burn buildings. You thought that the violence would stop at a certain threshold. And now you're shocked that the tolerance of the violence reaches a threshold that even you find offensive. Or you didn't think that there was a threshold and it wasn't the violence per se that bothered you, so long as the violence was directed against people you considered your enemies, the right, Trump supporters, punch a Nazi. I'm all down for punching a Nazi, but don't punch a Jewish person. And now you see them tolerating the violence that you tolerated against your adversaries, but they tolerated it against your allies. And you're like, okay, well, now I don't tolerate the violence because it's against me. Or you just have no foresight. Just don't understand who you're dealing with. And it might just be a little bit of all three.